Hello, I'm Dick Foth, and I'd like to welcome you to Known, stories to make sense of it all. And these stories are what I call walking books, real-life people from different places, different ages, different cultures, and I want to have some conversations with them across disciplines and generations and cultures in order to encourage a kind of knowing, fresh lenses through which to see the world. One of those lenses will be Scripture, or more specifically, Jesus of Nazareth, whose life, I believe, changed the course of the history of the world. So, thanks for listening in. Great to have you with us. Well, here we are, and I am sitting with my friend Mark Batterson by a lake in Southern Virginia. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
And it's about 7 o'clock, and you can hear the ambient sounds of crickets and cicadas and birds in the background. So
it's a little different ambient sound than Capitol Hill in D.C. Most mornings I wake up and it's garbage trucks and sirens and
exactly
and car alarms. Yes,
I'd rather be alarmed by the sounds of birds. This is great. So you're not a Virginia guy. You're not a D.C. guy. You are a Minnesota guy, historically.
Yes.
Where were you born in Minnesota?
I was born at Swedish Hospital. Doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Actually, not far to locate it. Not far from North Central University. About 2 blocks from there.
In Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis.
Okay.
And grew up in a little town called New Hope. And our whole extended family lived there. My grandfather was the first municipal judge of Fridley, Minnesota, taught at the University of Minnesota, and taught for 1 year at Northwestern when Billy Graham was the president.
Oh my
so
goodness.
we have deep roots in Minnesota. Most of the blood coursing through my veins is Swedish, even though I don't know that I look Swedish. That's my roots.
Well, and just for those who are listening, this is not Northwestern University in Chicago that Billy was. It was a small college, sort of religious college back in the day.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's great. But you left Minnesota when?
We moved when I was in the 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
Just one state over to Wisconsin. And that's where I got a little bit of cheese in my blood.
Wow.
And then from there, in the 6th grade, moved down to the Chicago area. And so I really say I grew up in Chicago. I mean, those were the formative years, and moved there about the same time that Michael Jordan was drafted by the Bulls.
There you go. There you go.
And so I like deep dish pizza. I don't miss the weather in the winter.
No, but you like the Bulls, and you have this anomaly where you like the Green Bay Packers. Is that correct?
It is, and to even make it stranger, I like the Vikings too. Dick, no one can understand how I could like both of those teams.
Yes.
And you know what I tell them?
Yes.
To anybody who has more than 2 children, do you love them both?
Well, there you go. There you go. That's good. So your journey with Jesus, when did that start?
Yeah. Well, I grew up early memories of going to church, a covenant church.
So you're a church guy, Swedish covenant.
Yeah. But the moment for me was my parents took me and my brother to see a film, I think at a church downtown Minneapolis. I would have been about 5 years old.
Yeah.
It was a Billy Graham film called The Hiding Place.
Oh, yeah.
And in retrospect, I'm thinking, what were my parents thinking taking me to a movie about the Holocaust? I'm 5 years old, but after that movie, I asked my mom if I could ask Jesus into my heart.
My goodness.
And she tucked me into bed that night, and that was a moment. That was a defining moment for me. And so, as you know, one of my life goals is to make a movie. And I think part of that is because when you've been impacted in a certain way, let's say by the medium of a movie, then I think you naturally want to flip that and do the same thing for someone else. And so that was the beginning of a journey. And but in reality, though, Dick, I would say that really for the first 19 years, it was more about me inviting Jesus to follow me.
Sure, I get that.
And then it kind of flipped at
How'd
19.
that go?
Well,
no. let me just make a comment about The Hiding Place. That's, for those who don't know, it's a story of a woman and her family, her extended family. Her name was Corrie ten Boom. She lived outside Amsterdam in a village area called Haarlem, and the family believed that Jews were God's chosen people, and they hid them during the Holocaust. She ended up going to Ravensbrück, getting out on the surface by a clerical error, and became a well-known speaker, Corrie ten Boom. And last year, or 2 years ago, we have this thing where we take our 13-year-old grandchildren somewhere in the world and use retirement money and tell our kids, you don't get this. We're taking our grandkids somewhere. And this one, Hope Clements from Eugene, Oregon, had read Anne Frank's book, The Diary of Anne Frank. She wanted to go there. We also went to Haarlem, and her favorite place was going to that watch shop and going upstairs and seeing the closet where they hid these folks. And it was a powerful time.
Wow.
And Corrie ten Boom actually died in the United States, and my mother is buried in Fairview, I think it's Fairview Cemetery in Santa Ana, California.
Yeah.
And her body lies 100 feet or so from where Corrie ten Boom's.
Really?
Isn't that something?
That is something.
It's
one of my favorite Corrie ten Boom stories is when she spoke, she would sometimes look down and people couldn't figure out what she was doing, but she was needlepoint. She was knitting something together, and she would hold it up, but the side with all the jumble of threads, and essentially say this is what life looks like from our vantage point, and then she would flip it over and show the design, and
that's cool.
From God's perspective, this is what it looks like. And I've often thought, how in the world does God use a woman named Corrie ten Boom, who experiences tremendous suffering and loss, to somehow reach a boy in Minneapolis, Minnesota? I mean, that's just only in the sovereignty of God.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You've said for some years that I know more trivia than anybody. I don't know if that's absolutely true, but here's a trivia piece for you. Corrie ten Boom was the first female licensed watchmaker in Holland.
That I did not know.
There you go. I told you something you didn't know, Batterson.
Wow.
That's great. Okay. You are a reader. I go to your office, which is not very large, up above Ebenezer's Coffee House, 2nd and F Street, northeast in D.C., about a long block from Union Station. I walk in, and it's hard to find a place to sit for all the stacked books. They're not just neatly in the shelves. I got to tell you, your office is a jumble of words. Is that fair?
It's very fair. I ran out of shelf space a long time ago.
So when did you know you were a reader?
Well, growing up, I wasn't.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Through high school, I don't think I read but half a dozen books that weren't assigned for a class. And then my senior year of college, something snapped. I was actually on a basketball trip, a road trip.
Yeah.
And I picked up an 800-page biography of Albert Einstein.
Good grief.
And loved it. And started reading, and developed this voracious appetite to read. I think the second book was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Those two books, when you visit my office, sit in a special place.
Einstein and Carnegie right next to each other.
Yep, and those two books, I think, made me fall in love with reading and with life. And by the way, it's in that book that, it's Einstein who said, never lose a holy curiosity. And I love the juxtaposition of those two words, holy and curiosity. And I think it's very appropriate. So, and I never have.
Isn't that something?
So I've got science shelf, business shelf. I'm interested in about everything.
Yeah, you are.
Fascinating.
That's good. So you're a reader, but there are a gazillion readers, but precious few writers. When did you start putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, whatever, to write things?
Yeah, two things happened when I was 22 and in seminary. One was just a distinct moment of calling that I felt like in that still small voice, God was calling me to be a voice to my generation, and I interpreted that as God calling me to write. I remember exactly where I was in the seminary chapel, just pacing and praying, but then that's coupled with, and I can't remember if the assessment or aptitude assessment was before or after, but, in graduate school, you take this assessment that tells what you're good at, what you're not, and what you should do and what you shouldn't. Bottom line is, the assessment said, whatever you do, don't write. It is not a natural gifting. It just isn't.
There goes Myers-Briggs and Strength Finders.
So you know this, but what happened is over 13 years, I read 3,000 books.
Wow.
And so I read 3,000 books before I wrote one. But what I did is I think I wasn't just reading for content or to learn. I was really reverse engineering, especially the books I liked.
For style?
Yeah, for style and just, what really impacted me as a reader, and then how can I flip that and perhaps do that as a writer?
Yeah. It's interesting to me that when we met, I think you were 26, I was 51 or 2 or something, maybe a little older than that. And we hadn't known each other very long. And one day you had asked me about a book that Ruth and I had written. It wasn't a tremendously well-written book, but it was our heart. It was called When the Giant Lies Down. And I didn't know anything about marketing or any of that kind of stuff. But you said to me, Dick, I think I'm supposed to write. I want to be a writer. And knowing a little bit about how hard it was to write, in my head, I said, in my words, I said, really? Well, okay. In my head, I was saying, yeah, right. So now here we are, 20 years down the road, and there are millions of people around the world reading things you have written. Well, for everything from books on prayer to vision to commitment to just 15 titles. How many books now?
Yeah, 15
titles. And we had the privilege of penning one together called Trip Around the Sun, and that was great fun. Yep. And Susanna, our daughter, helped frame that a bit. Ruth and my daughter. So in a day when cursive, literal writing, is going away in our culture. And I think to myself, how in the world, a generation down the road, are we going to sign our names? Are we back to X's, or what? But this is just an old guy talking. What's your advice to a young person? Let's say that we have a high school or a university student listening to us today. What are your thoughts, your words, just about the practice of writing? And I'll frame it this way. That's the question. But when I'm with you,
you're always, virtually without exception, carrying a moleskin book or a journal, some kind of writing pad, and you're in conversation, you make notes. Well, and the team, the other folks on the team, I look around and they're mimicking you in that. And last year when I came to speak here in D.C., I happened to sit down by your son, who was 14 or 15, and he had a pad and he was writing in it. What's all that about? All you guys have bad memories, or what's the deal? By the way, all of us have bad memories.
Yes. You know, I think it's Benjamin Franklin, who first said that the shortest pencil's longer than the longest memory.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
you made that up right there. Gave it to Ben Franklin.
When in doubt, it's either Ben Franklin or C.S. Lewis. Well, I think it's a spirit. I think it's a biblical principle. It's 2 Corinthians 10:5 that take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. The way that I take things captive is with pen and paper, and so I've journaled really since high school. Now, my high school journal, all I was capturing was how many points I scored in the most recent basketball game. But, you know, that matured over the years. And so in chapel, in college, and then now, I rarely meet with anyone that I don't have a journal and a pen handy, because I forget stuff like crazy. I don't have the capacity to just remember. You remember details. I think you're this unique exception that somehow you take notes in your brain.
Well, I think some of my details I make up. You got to fill in the gaps, you know.
But you know, for me, those journals are pretty critical.
You know, Jesus in the Gospels, I think the only place we see him writing is in the sand, when you have that exchange with the woman caught in the act of adultery. We could say that the Father and Son, by the Spirit, wrote all of the scriptures that we have, but his close associates wrote letters, and because they wrote letters, we have that not just the information, but the inspiration and the direction from Scripture. So your ability to distill ideas into memorable phrases is, I think, not only a gift, but in a soundbite era, it fits. It matches the times we are in. As a person who's on my 76th trip around the sun, I think about distilling things, first of all, because you just can't cover the waterfront the way one used to, but because there are precious few things that make life work. So I think of distillation in that sense. But you've got dozens of what I would call succinct phrases. Share with us 2 or 3 of those, and I want to ask you some questions about it. So give us one.
Yeah. Well, love people when they least expect it and least deserve it. And this isn't original to me, but work like it depends on you, pray like it depends on God.
Okay. Let's come back to the first just a minute.
Yeah.
So, love people when they least expect it and least deserve it. Where did that come from? Was that from an experience, or did that come from a scripture, or both? What?
Yeah, you know, I think it's the woman caught in the act of adultery. This moment
we were just
where,
talking about.
The Jesus, she doesn't expect it,
Right.
because everybody else is ready to stone her,
Right.
and might not deserve it. I don't know. According to Jewish law, she had, Jesus certainly is. What she did was wrong, but in a moment when she least expected it, least deserved it, Jesus steps in and essentially says, "You can stone her over my dead body." I mean, what an incredible moment. That will imprint you forever. And I've had a few experiences like that with in my life, that those are the things that really impact us when someone loves us in that way. And
my experience in talking to people over the years and listening, and even our experience in being out on this lake in a boat with some of our colleagues, when you ask them what were defining moments in your life, virtually without exception, a moment when I received grace, if you will, especially when we were younger. I don't know if we need more grace when we're young. Probably not. We need more grace when we're older. But that's a profound thing. When I least expect it, least deserve it. Okay, another one.
And by the way, since you bring up the subject of grace, when I read first John chapter 1, where it says Jesus was full of grace and truth.
Right.
Grace means I'll love you no matter what.
Right.
Truth means I'll be honest with you no matter what.
That's cool.
So, I don't know where it comes from, but I tend to think about things in a parallel fashion, or kind of almost a two-sided coin. An insult from a fool is probably a compliment, and a compliment from a fool is probably an insult. So it's and I see that in Scripture. I think you see it in the Proverbs.
I was going to say, if we were writing Scripture today and you were one of the chosen ones, you'd probably be great in the Proverbs.
Well, probably need a little bit more wisdom to be, but yeah.
The idea of living in kind of as a friend of mine would say, in a binary world, where you have this juxtaposed over against that kind of juxtaposition of words or ideas really comes through when both in your writing and in your speaking. And anyway, it's just a great help. Any other particular phrases that you like? You said one other one there, and I went back and sort of said, let's go back to the first one.
I mean, we have certain core values and core convictions that we say all the time. If you stay humble and stay hungry, there's nothing God can't do in you or through you. I believe that. But, I think what I've tried to do to the best of whatever ability God's given me is, how can I phrase this in the most memorable way? And that's, to me, the gold standard is Jesus. I mean, the parables, most of them are less than 250 words, but hear them once, you'll remember them forever. Because, they're genius. Faith is like a mustard seed, and then boom, it just Jesus' ability to communicate things in such a simple way. Oliver Wendell Holmes said that there's simplicity on the near side of complexity, and there's simplicity on the far side of complexity. So I'm not advocating little maxims that haven't been thought through, that haven't been wrestled with. What I'm after is far side complexity, or far side simplicity, where take 613 laws in the Old Testament, one great commandment: love God, heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Distillation.
I mean, unbelievable, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, and Jesus always uses metaphors, oftentimes, that are connected to nature, and and if he numbers the hairs on your head, which for some of us is less of a chore, or if a sparrow falls, he knows. That I don't understand how all that works, but I think as we wrap up this time together, I think we should, you and I, not use any of our words anymore for just a moment, and let's listen to some sparrows and larks and so forth in the background. So I'm just going to wrap this up. Thanks for being with me, Mark.
Thanks, Dick.